everybody, I'm Brian Julius. I'm the Chief Content Officer for Enterprise DNA, and I'm super excited today for two reasons. One of which is I've got one of my absolute favorite people in the Power BI community with me today, Greg Deckler. Welcome, Greg.
Hello. Thanks, Brian.
How's it going, Greg? And the second reason is because we're going to be rolling out an exclusive tool set for Enterprise DNA members that Greg has developed that I think is phenomenal. And it's really in line with our goal to decrease the development time and really speed the process of Power BI report development. And it's a 3-tool set that I think fits together beautifully and really fills a lot of gaps that currently are difficult to do or time consuming or just annoying, and makes those really simple and actually a lot of fun to use. So Greg's going to be talking through that. But before we do that, I just want to introduce Greg to the few who may not know him. He's a 6-time, I think soon to be 7-time Microsoft MVP, is the author of some of my absolute favorite Power BI books, the new Learn Power BI, Power BI Cookbook, and my personal favorite, DAX Cookbook, which is an essential DAX book, and is really related, I think, pretty closely to some of the things we're going to talk about in Quick Measure Pro today. So, Greg, welcome. And what I want to do is jump in and have you talk a little bit about kind of how this tool set came about. It's kind of a fun story for those who haven't heard it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I'm glad you like DAX Cookbook, because that is my personal favorite book. I would love to write like a DAX Cookbook too that includes like another 100 DAX measures and stuff like that. But it's actually the least. It sells the least well of all of my books in terms of that. I don't know why, but it's my favorite book that I.
It's really surprising because it's really surprising because it fits so beautifully with the other kind of DAX book that everybody has to have, which is the definitive guide. That one is kind of, that's the theory book, and this to me is really the practice book. Is like, how do you do, I've got a particular DAX problem. How do I do it? And that DAX Cookbook is one of the first books off my shelf when I've got those sort of questions.
I'm glad to hear it. That was a lot of fun to write. But in terms of like, and it does, and the DAX Cookbook really kind of fits with, Quick Measures Pro, because it's all about, again, it's about these DAX methods or formulas that you can reuse between different data models, right? And that was kind of the idea behind DAX Cookbook, was that I could create real world scenarios around certain KPIs and then show how to calculate those KPIs, and then somebody could replicate that within their own data model. And so the Quick Measures Gallery, which was kind of like, where DAX Cookbook came from, as well as, Quick Measures Pro, that same concept is all about creating reusable DAX formulas that you can just reuse over and over again. Everybody has those data intelligence metrics that, measures that they have to create, within every single Power BI data model. And so, things like Quick Measures Pro allows you to do that really simply and easily. But in terms of the history behind it, it actually came out of all things. It came out of a flame war on the community side. I kind of chagrined to like admit that, but that's where it came from. And the story behind it was there was a certain user that was fairly well known if you're in the community, that was kind of toxic. And one day, I guess I had just had enough, and just, the guy was calling, users like a noob and, stupid and all this stuff. And one day, I usually just ignore that stuff, but one day I'd had enough of it, and I started, I'm like, dude, you can't do that, and then we got into a big argument. And the poor guy that started that thread, I think he got his question answered, but then the question, it went on for like another, 17 pages, I mean, and so, and at one point in the argument, I guess you could say, this individual made the comment that like, well, blah, 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 you don't like, what I'm saying because you're the one that writes all those quick measures that are in Power BI desktop. And of course, this is the tit for tat phase, right, of the flame war. And so I'm like, well, actually, I've got about 200 quick measures in the quick measure gallery, but Microsoft's never put one of my quick measures into Power BI desktop. And it was at this point that the light bulb went on, right? I hit send and I'm like, oh my gosh, that would make a funny blog article. So I'm like, I could write this blog article about like, I'm all mad at Microsoft because, they haven't put my stuff into the, my quick measures into the desktop, and they must hate me and all that, there's all this juvenile stuff, right? So I'm like, so I had this blog article written on my head, and it, and if you've read it, it's got, lemon tree genocide in there, and it's got, worldwide turtle carnage and all kinds of just crazy stuff, but it was just, one of those inspirations. I just had this idea for this blog article, and I had it completely written in my head, and then realized, well, in order to pull this off, I actually have to write a tool, to like, do this. So I spent a weekend, more or less, and taught myself how to write a C# WPF application, which was, thank God for Kay Uncroft's metadata translator, because I use that as kind of the code base and to learn how to write a C# WPF application that interfaced with the Power BI data set. And then the first version of Mushkookum was born. Microsoft hates Greg's quick measures. And it included about 30 quick measures. And that, was very, and I actually even, I thought of it as throwaway. I was just going to write this just so I can write this blog article that I've got written in my head. And then I realized I really enjoyed it. And I could see some practical applications for it. And then I got feedback from like you in particular and other community members. I was like, hey, this is really great. We really like this. So
well, like, it's funny because that article was, I think, how we got to know each other. I thought the article was hilarious. And we started communicating about that. And then it was like, hey, this tool is actually like, it's not just funny, this tool is good. And it kind of reminds me, it's like if Tim Berners-Lee created the World Wide Web in order to rickroll people, and then like realize, hey, this thing actually might be useful.
That's a great analogy. I love that analogy. Who knows? Maybe he actually did create it to rickroll people. Too funny. Yeah, so that's kind of the origin story behind Mushkookum, if you will. So that's where it all came from. And I don't know if I'd call the first version of that tool very good. I mean, it was kind of garbage, but it worked. It was what's the point of it? And I've improved upon it greatly. I think I've had 4 major releases since then, just adding different functionality. And the latest functionality is it goes beyond just like the quick menu. Like you can use quick measures in Power BI Desktop. That's what that was the original intent of that tool. But now it's evolved into you can create your own custom measure definitions that you can save and are yours and are stored locally. And then you can reuse those as you go forward. So you can even so now you can basically create your own quick measures, essentially, is what it allows you to do. And I'll be exploring that. I don't know if we have time to cover that today, but I'm going to be covering stuff like that, the more advanced topics in some of my videos I've got planned for Enterprise DNA.
Yeah, and that's something I should have mentioned in my intro, which is that through all these discussions we've been having, that you're actually now an Enterprise DNA expert partner and contributor. And so, we've brought you on board, and you're, in addition to building out this, this great tool set for us, you're also going to be creating some content, and a lot of that content, I think, initially is going to be, geared toward how to use what we're calling the pro version of this tool set, which is kind of an enhanced version specifically for Enterprise DNA members.
Yep, that's correct. Absolutely.
So why don't we now actually, if you can share screen, kind of just jump in and take a look at the 3 tools and show folks what this thing can really do.
Yeah, sure. Let me know when you can see it.
I can see it.
Yeah, so I've got this is my Mushkookum test data set. It just doesn't have a lot. It's got like a calendar and a date table. And this date table is the Enterprise DNA date table that you turned me on to. So it's got all of so this is generated by Power Query M code. And it's got all the different columns and all of that sort of stuff. And I've been doing some tweaking, and I've got a few other tables and that sort of stuff and some measures, but nothing too crazy. But as you can see here, I've got the Quick Measure Pro, Power Sort Pro, and Metadata Mechanic Pro. These are the Enterprise DNA versions of the tools. And these all get installed along with the Enterprise DNA website link with just a single installer. So there's an MSI file that I think you guys are going to make available on the web soon here to Enterprise DNA subscribers that they can download, and they install it, and they'll get these 4 icons added to their external tools ribbon. So Quick Measures Pro is the first one, and you guys did a great job with the logos. I am not a graphic designer, so I appreciate that tremendously.
Yeah, we've got a really good graphic design team.
Yeah, so I get this on the right screen then. So here is basically Quick Measures Pro, and as you can see over here, in terms of, I've got all of the quick measures from the Power BI desktop are included here, along with a ton of them from the Quick Measures gallery as well. And that's just not myself, but other authors that have created them, and I give them credit within, if I can find one. Well, I'll find one eventually as we go through here. But as you can see, I've got a bunch of different ones here. So I've got, and they're all categorized around like data intelligence. And then this is when I went on a kick regarding trying to replicate every Excel, formula within DAX. So I've got all of those in here. And then, different filter functions, financial functions, lookup functions, math. Some other ones like Cthulhu's, is kind of a fun one, which is like a repeating counter or index counter, if you will. Statistics, all of the SVGs. So here's a good example of, things that were done by other. So this one was done by Tom Martins, for example. But the nice thing about this one is that sharing these out within the Power BI gallery is kind of a pain because of the HTML and the way you could never just copy the code and then just use it. Because there were, I don't know how many times I had people come to me because some colon or something like that got munged up. I think it was actually this data image or something. It got replaced with like colon or something like that. Anyway, you couldn't just copy it, but these formulas you can just configure and then click create, and it creates it in your model. So for example, this one's a pretty complex one. Now let's go through the rest of these, the time intelligence and totals and unit conversion. But we can pick a simpler one, maybe something like sequential here. And what you can do here, so what you see here is when you click on a quick measure over here in the left-hand pane, you get a configuration panel. So it's very similar to the quick measure experience that you get when you're in Power BI desktop and you are creating quick measures via Power BI desktop. So what I can do here, sequential, what this does is this is designed to create a sequential week number that spans years. So very handy if you're doing week over week calculations. So because if you want to do like compare this week to previous week, you just have to subtract 1. And it doesn't matter if you're in the first week of the year and you're comparing the last week of last year, it's always just -1, right? So what I can do here is I can say, so I have some configurations, and then I can say set, and let's say I want to use my year column or the year column from the calendar table for my year, and I want to use the week or the month, so I'll use my week number here and click OK. And so I can create either, unlike Power BI quick measures, I can create columns or measures. So I'll just create a column here. I can generate the DAX for it. And so here is the DAX to create a sequential number column within the calendar table. And as you can tell here, I'm going to create this in the calendar table. It's going to be of a type column. I don't want a display folder or a format string. So this is kind of a nice feature, I think, of Mushkookum or Quick Measures Pro, in terms of you can actually set the metadata for the fields or the measures or the columns while you're creating them, which is something that Power BI desktop can't do. You kind of have to flip it back and forth between the report view or the data view and the model view, which is kind of a pain. So anyway, if I hit create here, so it says it's been created successfully. We'll go check our calendar, and here's our week number sequential. Now, when you create columns, Power BI desktop gives you this little warning thing. You have to refresh the model. But now if I go to my calendar table, so now I have this sequential week number column. And as you can see, if I scroll down here to go past to the next year, it's still counting up 53, 54, 55, 56, etc. So that's the sequential. That's the sequential. So it's pretty easy to use, right? In terms of creating a column, and reusing this DAX and just configuring what's going on.
Right. I mean, this mirrors kind of the offsets in the in the date table, but it lets you create those sequential, columns for any field you want. So even if you've got a field which doesn't have an offset, you can just a couple of clicks and boom, you've got it.
Yep, that's right. And then I guess we could take another look at another one. I think it's Chelsea-Heiden's duration is always a good one, which kind of shows off. So Chelsea-Heiden's duration is one of my favorites because it was one of the first problems I came across in DAX that somebody asked me to solve, and I really couldn't solve it because DAX and Power BI Desktop doesn't really have any kind of concept of a duration, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that's time and date related is stored in a decimal number. And I won't go into the details I won't geek out on all the details of how that all works, but there was no concept of being able to display things like in Power Query. You actually have a duration type, which displays, like seconds in HHMMSS format or DDHHMMSS format. But you really couldn't do that in Power BI. People wanted to be able to display like how long a ticket had been opened in that kind of a duration format, and they wanted that to be in the y-axis. Well, there was no way to do it because you had to use a format to get it into that HHMMSS format, but that turned it into a text. And so you realized it was unusable within like charts, as far as a y-axis and that sort of thing. But when custom format strings came along, which Chelsea-Heiden created while she was an intern at Microsoft, she solved that problem. So, like, for example, I can, I have a durations table, so I can choose my durations. So let's see, I was doing a bunch of experimentation on this, so forgive me, I've got a bunch of crazy stuff going on. And I think the duration in this case is in seconds. Let's say we want to sum it, or we want to do an average of it. We'll just do sum, and we'll create a measure. And the important part to all this is make sure you have all your settings this way, or if you change something down here, always regenerate your DAX. So again, this was actually based upon a collaboration I had with Konstantinos way back in the day for getting things in HHMMSS format. And then
I've used his pattern for that.
Yeah. So we came up with this. I think I came up with a solution for it, and then he provided a better solution for it. And so we kind of collaborated on a blog post, back in 2016. But I always include, where this came from and give credit where credit is due. Let's put it that way. So I can just shorten this to Chelsea-Heiden's duration measure. And as you can see down here, it's got a format string already pre-built in for 008000. So what this does is it takes the hours and multiplies it by 10,000, minutes by 100, and then this adds the seconds. And so that puts it into the right places, if you will, in order for the custom format string to work. But it leaves it a numeric value that you can display within columns and charts and everything else. So it's got a custom format string. Let's go ahead and put it in display folder 1, folder 2, let's say, and it's a measure and the durations. We can hit create. So there's folder 1, folder 2, and there's our measure.
Awesome.
Yep. So that in a nutshell. Again, I'll go into more advanced topics with creating your own custom measures, right? That's what all these extra buttons are for. So if you want to see what's really going on behind the scenes with Quick Measures Pro, you hit the raw, and these are actually, tags that it's replacing with the whatever you got configured over here in this panel. So that's how it kind of works behind the scenes.
And this is the one part of Quick Measures Pro that takes a little bit of learning. I mean, I think it's not a big learning curve, but it's one of the few things in this entire tool set that you can't just figure out by playing with it.
Right. Well, there's a lot to go on that's going on here, because I wanted to make it very I wanted to be able to basically control almost everything. So when you're creating your own custom measures, you can actually control the what these labels are for each one of these. You can control the tooltips that are displayed when you hover over the different elements like this, or the labels. and all that's configurable within the tool, which is really powerful, but it's hard to be able to get all of that functionality in, and make it just like intuitively and, dirt simple to use. So yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve, but I don't, 1 or 2 videos and, you'll be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, we didn't talk about this, but I'm wondering if you got a few minutes, if we could just jump in and you could show one of the SVG measures, because I think those are really cool, and I've been using those in my own report development, particularly that flashing red to just highlight. You can kind of use that in combination with an if statement or a switch statement to highlight certain conditions that you want to show in a report. And I wonder if you could just take a minute and show folks kind of how easy those are to create in this.
I can try that. Let's see, measure table 1 red, so you can set like the color of the blinking dot, if you will. And this is built off of Stephen Few's, red dot is the kind of the source of it. So let's see, line thickness color equals black. If sum of table 1. Okay, so that, yeah, all right, we can go with this and see what happens here. We'll create a measure and say create. Then let's see if we can use this thing. And again, you can add in logic around this to say, hey, if it's above a certain threshold or below a certain threshold. So I think if I choose like this and put it into a matrix, and then I use, I left my folder 1, folder 2. There you go. And I probably have to set this to an image, which I probably forgot to do. Well, there's a note for an improvement. There we go.
There we go.
There's our blinking red light. So I should have set this, and I should have that as a default for the SVG. All the SVGs I should have set this to an image URL from the get-go, which I could have done here, but I should make that a default for all of the SVGs. So I'll take that as a note to do that. So that these things will automatically get tagged as an image URL when you create them.
But I think it's a great example, because that's something that you look at the DAX to do. It's not easy DAX by any stretch. And it would take a lot of effort and a lot of time to figure that one out on your own. Whereas, through Quick Measure Pro, you've got 24 SVGs right at your fingertips.
Yeah, and some of these are crazy complicated, like the ones done by just endless amounts of configuration that you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this one by Tom Martins. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this in the Quick Measures Galley, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just a ton of code, right? So they can get really kind of crazy.
So yeah, I appreciate you showing that. And that's one definitely when folks, download this, it's really worth playing around. It's fun to play with, and you'll really get some very useful capabilities for your reports that would be difficult to get otherwise. So why don't we move on? I know we're going to be doing some videos with you on custom measures in Quick Measure Pro, and kind of how to adapt patterns, maybe even stuff that people have saved in Analyst Hub, bring that down into a kind of a write once, use many scenario in QM Pro. But why don't we take a look at the other 2 tools, because I think those provide some also incredible functionality.
Yeah, sure. And just FYI for Enterprise DNA members, this is a much nicer editor than what's in the kind of free version, original version, Mushgookum, if you will, which is basically just a text box. This is actually Teleric's syntax editor control. And so I'm going to be adding a bunch of functionality to this for tagging, so that it's basically an equivalent user experience to if you're creating measures within Power BI Desktop itself, so that it'll do the color coding and do the type ahead and do the kind of hints when you put in DAX functions and things like that. So that's all planned functionality that's going to be exclusive to the Enterprise DNA version. And
so it actually, I mean, even if you're not creating, quick measures per se, you could just use it as your better DAX editor.
Right. So a DAX editor just to where you can actually set your metadata as you create the measures and the columns in your data model. Yep. That's kind of the idea. And then other things I've got planned are, wouldn't it be cool if you could create your own custom data intelligence group with your own custom data intelligence measures. And so think about having radio buttons next to these groups where you would get all of the different configuration options for all the measures in that group. You hit create, and it creates all those measures simultaneously within your data model. And then, I want to add in the ability to create calculation groups in here along with measures and columns. So got a ton of features planned.
I've seen the list, and there's just kind of an almost unlimited kind of flow of ideas you've got in terms of enhancements you can make to this. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to be working with you to prioritize those, and then come up with a regular update schedule, kind of a predictable update schedule. So folks will know that it's every quarter, if we are able to do every month. Whatever makes sense in the, in terms of kind of how the extent of updates that can be done, given the amount of time you've got available and the, kind of the bounds of the partnership, kind of getting that so that folks know, okay, at this regular interval, you're going to expect to see kind of a whole bunch of new, Quick Measure Pro and, Enterprise DNA Pro tools updates.
Yeah, and I'd love to see get feedback from the Enterprise DNA community as well. In terms of ideas for enhancements to the tools, as well as even like brand new tools. Because if you have an idea for a tool, I can, there's a good chance we can probably create something. In fact, that's exactly where PowerSort Pro came from. Was I was doing an interview with Reed Havens on his vlog and on YouTube, and he mentioned that one of his real big annoyances was he always hated having to go into and set these 20 different sort by columns within his data model. And so that weekend I wrote the first version of PowerSort and hey Reed, you might like this. So I can bring that one up. It's probably going to come up on the other screen, so I'll have to move it. Yep. So this is PowerSort. Looks very similar in terms of the basic interface to Quick Measures Pro, but this is PowerSort Pro, and this has been specifically created to enable Enterprise DNA date table matching. So there's kind of, so if I find my sort by columns, what it's going to do is it's going to go in and it kind of goes through a 3-tiered process. So it's going to go in, if there's already a sort by column set in the data model, then it's going to return that. Then it's going to check this, if this Enterprise DNA date table matching is checked, it's going to check to see if there's any columns that match the names for the Enterprise DNA date table, and then put in the correct sort by column. And thanks for giving me that quick cheat sheet to do that. And then third, you can actually do kind of pattern matching. So let's say you have a month column and you have a year column, and you're always naming your sort by columns like month space sort and year space sort. Then this will do a pattern matching where it says, okay, if the column, if there's a column in the data set that has the name of the column and also this sort by text, essentially, then it'll assign that as the sort by column. It's kind of an odd pattern matching, but it's the best I could come up with, on short notice. So when I click this then, so what happens is it goes through and it finds, so these are calendar, but if I go down to dates, so you can see down here, quarter and year, it's identified quarter and year as the sort by column. That's because I have this checked. And month name, it's identified month of year, and et cetera, et cetera. So these are all of the sort by columns that are specified within the Enterprise DNA date table, it automatically finds those and puts them in here. And then you can just basically, I'm going to unset this one. Sometimes it gets some false positives. But then if I just click set sort by columns, then it's going to set all of those within my data model. So
yeah,
now,
that is fantastic, because that's one of those things. Just I love the date table, and it was developed by Melissa DeCorte, our resident M code expert, and it's really become the de facto standard. But the one disadvantage it's got is it's a big table. And so you've got a lot of these, these sort orders to set. And so, this just with, again, a couple of clicks just saves you that entire headache.
Yep. There, it went to the refresh now. So now if I go to my date table and I forget one of those quarter,
like month ampersand year is a really common one.
Month ampersand year. So now this one should be set to
month and year.
Month and year. There it is.
Yep. Perfect.
Yep. That easy. So instead of, it's not difficult, but it is kind of a pain to like click over here, find the column, set it. And there's always this weird delay with Power BI Desktop when you set the sort by columns. It almost like it freezes for a minute while it's setting the desk, and you can't go on to the next one. So, this one was inspired by Reed Havens. So, again, if you have ideas for tools that can save you time, headaches, etc., sometimes they can be created in a weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. This one, I actually was watching that interview, and when Reed said that, I was like, hey, that's a good idea. I wonder if that's possible. And then after the weekend, you're like, yep, it's not only possible, it's done.
And if you have individual ones that you want to set, you can always manually set them, right? I could set this year to be my year. So you'll see the same kind of interface elements between all of the different tools. So then if I'd hit sort by columns again, it would go through and set that one as well. So it's got the basic instructions over here. But this tool was designed to be kind of a one-purpose tool, but it really actually kind of inspired and set the groundwork for the next tool, which is a Metadata Mechanic. So if you think about the evolution of these tools, Quick Measures Pro, everything that's on Quick Measures Pro, all of these everything that you see here is actually predefined in the XAML, if you will. So the XML, all of these different controls are predefined. With PowerSort Pro, all of these different controls are actually generated by the code by the C# code. So once I figured out how I could do that, and then thinking about metadata and how to quickly, set different kinds of metadata, because that's really what the sort by column is a piece of metadata about a field or a measure or a column, essentially, then that kind of opened up the doors to a Metadata Mechanic, which I will launch next.
And this I love. I'm using this one all the time now because, there's a bunch of things that I find super annoying in terms of, Power BI defaulting to that long form date and, all the summations that you don't need. And so I don't want to spoil the punchline here, but this one is probably of the three, it's the one that I pop open first.
Yeah, this one was fun to put together. It took more than a weekend. I can tell you that, but it's basically kind of the same idea as PowerSort, right? Where I can essentially, what you can do is like, if I'm not going to mess around with any of these settings at the moment. But let's say I can I can go out there and I can get the metadata for all tables, columns, and measures within my data model. So even the ones I just created, right? So here they are. So what it does is, probably some of this metadata people don't even know about, like the alignment metadata, which I'm not even sure is used in Power BI Desktop, but it's a piece of metadata that you can set for a column. But anyway, your description, whether or not it's hidden in the data model, the data category, display folder, format strings, all of these different pieces, what the default summarized by is, whether it's a row label for the table, that sort of thing. So anyway, all of this different metadata, you can basically just go through and edit it all and then hit set metadata and away it goes, right? Or you can use these settings up here. Let's say I just want to pull back just my table and I want to hide all of the columns. So I can uncheck tables and measures. So I'm just pulling back columns within this table, hidden. I can update the metadata. And so now what it's done is it's gone through and said, okay, here's all the columns in that table, and I'm set the, whether it's hidden to true. And then if I click set metadata, it actually goes out and sets that metadata within the data model. As long as it didn't crash anything. There we go. Sometimes Power BI Desktop takes a little while.
Yeah. This one sometimes you got to give it time to think.
So I mean, and that's the thing. I'm working with. I'm trying to get a hold of the Power BI Desktop developers, because if you notice the warning on Metadata Mechanic, updating too much metadata simultaneously can crash your desktop. So if you tried to go out and set every piece of metadata for every column and measure and table in a large data model, it's very likely that Power BI Desktop's going to hang. So best.
That's literally the first thing I did, Greg, when you showed me this. I'm like, oh, this is great. I can set my summations, I can set my alignment, I can set my format strings, and I set everything and brought my whole model down.
Yeah. And I'm not sure why, because the original version of this, I didn't even do any checking, as far as I just went out and set everything that was on the screen. Now the new version goes out and says, well, is it already hidden? If it's already hidden, don't set that field, right? Because, that sort of, so it's very judicious in what it's going to set within the data model. And I'm doing each one as I'm using the correct APIs, the tabular APIs to do all of it. I just think it happens too fast. And for some reason, Power BI Desktop just kind of freaks out if you set like too much of it all at once. So anyway, I'm working on that issue and see if I can improve it. I'm not sure if it's my problem though.
Right. And the thing I found is that if you just set, even if you're setting a ton of stuff, if you set it by table, which is still quite fast, it's rock solid.
Yeah. As long as I've noticed that if you keep it to a table, and a lot of times I'll just, okay, if I need to hide everything, I'll hide all my stuff, and then I'll set my whole numbers. So that's what this stuff does. Is it's if you want to turn on thousands separator, and I'm going to internationalize this right now. It is using commas, and I need to fix that by adding another input field here, which allows you to put in your comma separator that you want to use. So that way it's more internationally friendly. But yeah, you can just add your the thousand separator to all your whole number columns. Again, update your metadata. So now it fills in all your format strings. And I'll show you this, because this was one of the, I don't know why I find this cool, but I just thought this was a great little feature. So if you notice, the vertical tabbing is on by default. What this allows you to do, I'm in the format string. I can hit tab and I move to the next format string, and then tab. And so I'm moving down through the format strings. You notice that this is a data type of string, so it doesn't get that format string. But the vertical tabbing, allows you to move and set the same field, within the data model really quickly, versus going, if you don't set this, then you're just going to tab horizontally like normal, right? So then again, I can set my metadata, and then I would have my thousand separator if I wanted to make sure that, all of my double numbers, which are decimal numbers. I know it gets confusing, but double numbers are decimal numbers in Power BI, and then currency is your fixed decimal numbers. But if you want to set all your decimal numbers to have 3 decimal places or 4 decimal places, you can set that here. Same kind of idea, right? And then this is your aggregations. If you want to get rid of your default aggregations or add a certain default aggregation to all of your different columns and stuff, you can do that here. You can add in your custom format strings. And then this one's kind of cool. This one allows you to take all the measures. So let's see, if I go back to all and I say measures, and then I want to send all my measures to let's send them to the table. So I can update my metadata. So now I've got my home table set to table. So regardless of where they are in here, so I've only got one measure here now. And so now if I set metadata, going to finish. And once this updates, you can see the folder 1, folder 2 has appeared here. Now it's finished updating, maybe.
There we go.
There we go. There we go. So now I've got my Chelsea Adams duration measure in here, my sum of seconds, and my one SVG measure that I created. So,
and for me, that's fantastic because I'm one of those hardcore measure table people that when I get a file that's got measures spread across a bunch of different tables, it makes no sense to me. And so the first thing I end up doing is manually moving a bunch of stuff into the measures table. And so being able now just to basically say, let me set up a key measures table and then set that as the default and just have it sweep everything into that table is fantastic.
Yeah. And then you can find all the bad measure code that didn't refer to the table, right?
Right.
Then you can fix that. Yep. So, I mean, this one takes, I don't know if it's a huge learning curve. Most of the directions are pretty clear in the notes panel. But again, one video or so that shows, there's just a lot of bells and whistles and things to flip and mess around with. So,
one thing, show the summation if you would, because that's another thing I love to turn off just by default because it drives me crazy when they put the summations in.
Yeah. So again, I can do update metadata, all columns within the table. So it's basically going to set all the summarized to nothing or default essentially. If I wanted to, right, I could set this and make these all sums. So I can update the metadata. So as you can see, anything that is a like calendar week number and that sort of stuff, it's all getting set to sum. And then if I wanted to, so you can either set it or remove it. In your case, it sounds like you want to remove it, right?
I'm a remove, yeah.
Done, and you just want to get rid of it all.
Yeah, so, but this is just such a time saver.
Yeah, that's why that's why I invented it, because I was like, man, if sort by is going to save that much time, sort by columns and that sort of stuff, then I was just thinking, man, just all the times that, because I don't know how many times I've developed data models. I'm going through every measure that I create and setting like 0 decimal places or whatever it is. Right. And then you're creating a bunch of these measures and you forget to do it a couple times. And then you use it in a visual and you're like, oh yeah, go back, set the decimals to 0 or whatever it is I want it to be. It's just really annoying. So to be able to like create all those measures without having to worry about that and then just come in here and set them all to what I want them to be just seems like a much faster, better process to me.
Yeah. Just one of those things that just makes Power BI a lot more enjoyable to work with. So,
and again, I got a bunch of things planned for this, right? So in terms of just like with like Quick Measures Pro, like one of the things I want to add to Power Sort is the ability to create a custom file and define your own sort by columns. Let's say you have certain common columns that come up, just like with Enterprise DNA date table. Maybe somebody else has common columns and common sort by columns that they use within their data sets, so they could go in and define those and then enable matching based upon that. There's a ton of things I want to do to make this interface better, a little bit bigger description window, kind of make these hidden and other things like checkboxes. Like there's a lot of these true false things, which right now they show the words true false. So I want to turn these into checkboxes, and that'll help shrink up some of the display and make things easier, right? If you're tabbing between them, you can just tab between them and hit the space bar and uncheck or check them, right? So lots and lots of improvements coming.
Well, Greg, this is fantastic, and I really appreciate the thought and the effort and the skill that's gone into this. I can't wait to get this in the hands of the members and just have them start using it and kind of experiencing the benefits that I have, and as you say, kind of provide us feedback on what they're doing with it, because the way I use it might be different than the way others use it, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of feedback in terms of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if it could do this? And the one thing I've learned about Greg is he loves the wouldn't it be cool. And those get taken as a challenge frequently. And So yeah, we're definitely gonna get this out shortly. When this video hits the streets in a few days, and get the tool in people's hands, and really start thinking, what else can we do with this? But it's really been a game changer for me, and I think that as people quickly get up the learning curve on this, they're going to find that it is for them as well.
Yeah, I'm excited and also fearful, right? Because now everybody's going to find all the bugs, and here come the flood of ideas. So it's exciting, but it's also like, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah, it's like, I think back to like that first post and the kind of the joke blog, and if you could have seen into the future and seen what this had become, it's kind of an amazing metamorphosis over a relatively short period of time. I mean, that was just like late last year, right?
Yeah, like late October, I think, is when I published that blog article.
Yeah.
What I won't do for a joke.
Well, Greg, thanks again, and we'll be back talking to you soon. And really thrilled to have you as a partner with us, and looking forward to a lot of great interaction coming up in the future.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks.